Hello, everyone. So we're back with another installation of our Torah series. I know it's been about, 3 weeks. So we're finally back. We are going to be narrowing this down. We're getting very close to the end, at least of Wayikra, Leviticus, and the laws therein. We've covered dietary laws, the kashrut. We have also covered the Moedim, the appointed time, or the feasts of Father, the Pesach, Passover, Hol HaMatzai, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Rishit Ketur, the Feast of First Fruits, Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, what some people call Pentecost, if you count the time of counting the Omer the way most people do, which, as we talked about in one video, I hold to that a little bit differently on the counting of time, but cover that in another video. Not going to get into that again. As well as the Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, the Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, and Yom HaShemonai, which is the 8th day feast tagged on to the Sukkot, or Feast of Booths. Just as a quick rehash, we've looked at that. We've looked at that video from last time on the biblical laws concerning slavery. We've looked at Shaul, all of his writings, and what he very clearly spoke concerning the Torah of Father, the law of Yah. We've looked at the misconception that a lot of people have, Christians namely, over whether or not the law was expunged when Yahshua came along. A lot of people not understanding that the law that a lot of the disciples were talking about, namely that Shaul was talking about, was not the Torah, but it was mainly the oral law that was taught predominantly by the movement of the Pharisees and the major schools of Pharisaic thought that were predominant in that time. Pharisees, of course, gave rise to later rabbinical Judaism, and then, of course, the Mishnah, which was basically an Jewish oration, an oral interpretation of the written Torah, or the written law. So we looked at, in most all situations, when Shaul was talking about the law, and he was speaking, I should say, in a critical manner of law, he wasn't speaking about the Torah, as we've covered many, many, many times throughout the course of the series. According to the apostolic writings, the Renewed Covenant New Testament writings, mainly his letters, his epistles, we find that Shaul repeatedly actually spoke in favor of the Torah. We know from Me'esh Slick on the book of Acts that he himself maintained the observance of Torah. He routinely sought to return to Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, for the feasts. He circumcised Timotheus, or Timothy. He, at least twice in his life, he took a vow, Nazirite vow, to then fulfill at a later time. The, again, scriptural record records that he fulfilled his vow. So we know, and he was also a Shabbat keeper. He would always preach and teach on the day of Shabbat, which was something that the people of Israel would do, is they would go in and they would teach on the Shabbat day, read from the First Covenant Old Testament scriptures. We know Yahshua also did this during his teachings. We looked at all of that. We looked at some of the misconceptions that people have concerning Shaul, concerning just why that Shaul was not teaching against Torah. It is a misconception. It's eisegetical interpretation of how that you interpret the writings of Shaul, mainly under a very modern theological, if you will, predisposed theological, doctrinal, orthodox assumption of how that a lot of people are geared, a lot of Christians and even preachers, when they teach from or read Shaul's writings. It's easy to eisegetically interpret what he's saying, to wrench it out of context. And, again, according to hermeneutics, which is the process essentially of how we interpret, it can refer to philosophy, it can return to any sort of wisdom writing, especially antiquity, but hermeneutics, especially concerning the interpretation or how we interpret scripture. Hermeneutics change. So, unfortunately, the long-standing Christian hermeneutics concerning the interpretation of Shaul's writings has been very linear, very straightforward. Most all of Orthodox Christianity really interprets his writings in the same way, not because they look into his writings under the exegetical microscope and interpret it by context, but it's an inherited interpretation. Basically, it's what their preacher taught them, or the seminary school that they attended, the biblical college taught them, the coursework, or what they were taught in their local church, the denomination they were a part of, or how they grew up. But as we looked at it when we broke down the writings of Shaul, which is really, you talk about the Torah of Yah, you talk about the law of our Father, then you cannot do so without putting the writings of Shaul under magnifying glass. And of course, that's a big part of what we did. The first 3 videos of the series, we did that a lot. So we broke down and dispelled a lot of the myths concerning the writings of Shaul. We also looked at some of the writings of the Besorah, the Gospels, Yahshua's words concerning the Torah, that he did not abolish Torah. He fulfilled parts of Torah. Mainly, he fulfilled the parts of Torah that required such things as animal sacrificial customs and ritualistic sacrifices, certain parts of ceremonial law. As we talked about before, the Torah is mainly broken down into 5 general points. You have the ceremonial law, the ritualistic law, you have the law of commerce, you also have of course, the actual Torah, you have the law of judgment. So there are several different forms of law, civil law, that the Torah encompassed within the first 5 books of the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. And when you break down the understanding of what Yahshua fulfilled, as we talked about in the series, the law in of itself in its entirety was not abolished. It was the particular parts of the Torah in which spoke specifically of the suffering of Messiah to come, who would fulfill the need for an animal ritualistic sacrifice, a propitiatory. I'm probably going to flub this word up a little bit. Sometimes I do. I'm going to replace it, a substitutionary sacrifice, which is what Yahshua did. And the essence of what parts of Torah that he fulfilled that substitutionary sacrifice or sacrificial requirement. The ceremonial law, such as the need for the Kohanim, or the priests, to perform a religious function in the place of father and man, and Yahshua becoming the final Kohen, or the final high Kohen, the final high priest, fulfilled that particular need of Torah. So we looked at that. We looked at some of Yahshua's own words. We looked at the kashrut, the dietary laws, and why those are still very much in effect. Again, we looked at the laws on slavery, which is a part of the Pentateuch. It's part of Torah, so it was important that we also broke that down. Of course, the Moed and the feast. We looked at the Shabbat. We looked at the Shemitah year, which was the 7th year of release. We looked at the Yovel, which was the Jubilee, the 50th year. So throughout this series, we have broken down a lot concerning Torah, comprising several long and hard fought, for me at least, videos, exposés, if you will, breaking down the nature, the reality of, as a child of Yah, how we are to properly see Torah, and what our relationship is with Father in regards to the Torah. Without the Torah, without Father's law, we have no law. Without law, in any facet of society, even the society of man, everything falls apart. Father has a law. Just because he sent Yahshua to be a substitutionary sacrifice did not mean that the law, Father's concept of how life was to be lived, a strict order of how he made life to function and everything in the world he made. To assume that the sacrifice of Yahshua suddenly did away with this and now everything is freewheeling and everybody can simply do whatever they want to do because they're saved by grace through faith, and there's now no condemnation for those who are in Yahshua HaMashiach, which is such a horribly misunderstood scripture. If we labor under the belief, like so many Christians do within the church, that Torah doesn't matter for anybody anymore, and that now it's a spiritual covenant that you belong to fully, and that your spirit and your salvation of your soul, your living being, has now been solidified, and now your entire focus of life is completely spiritual. It has nothing to do with physicality anymore. So the Torah of Yah, which many Christians teach, governs the physical aspect of life, it has no more hold on us. Our lives are completely spiritual. And when you get into that mindset and you do away with the concept of law and order, which is what Torah is, Torah prescribes law and order to us, Father's law and order. When we do away with that, we open the door to lawlessness. And no well-functioning society in man's world is ever going to do away with the law. And when the law of man in any nation begins to loosen, when people start to pick that law apart, or people start to strip the powers of that law away, then lawlessness abounds. The United States of America is a perfect example of that. Lawlessness is abounding. So we looked very, very deeply at Torah all the way up to the point in this video. And today we are going to look at another part. I don't know how long it's going to be. It's not going to be as extensive as the others, but today we are going to be looking at something that is important. A lot of people don't ever look at it because it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind, and it deals with something that we don't even think about, and it's something that we literally all make use of every day, and that is our clothes. We're going to be looking at today what Torah prescribes even concerning how we dress, which, yes, that's actually very much a thing. So, to start off, what is the law in Torah concerning clothing, how we dress? It is called the Sha'atnez. The Sha'atnez. That is the law, kind of like kashrut is Hebrew for dietary laws, or moedim is Hebrew for the appointed times, the feasts. The laws which govern the manner in which how we clothe and dress ourselves is known as Sha'atnez. So let's read this. First off, in Wayikra, Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 19, and as you know, I always use proper sacred Hebrew names and terms, so when I say a word you don't recognize, it's the Hebrew, and then I always follow it with the English. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle breed with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed, nor wear a garment of cloth made of two kinds of material. We find a second prohibition of this identical manner found in Devarim, or Deuteronomy, chapter 22, verse 11. Which, let's go ahead and pull that up too, because I don't want to leave any stone unturned. It really kind of repeats itself, but do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. Again, that's the second layer we find in Devarim, or Deuteronomy. Now, why and what exactly is this? We're going to break down specifically what this means. The Hebrew term Sha'atnez uniquely refers to a blend of wool and linen. Wool came from sheep, linen from flax fibers, both widely used in the ancient Near East. Textiles combining these fibers were technically possible, but rare. And just for sake of transparency, a textile is essentially an umbrella term that includes various fiber-based materials, including fibers, yarns, filaments, threads, and different types of fabric. Linen was valued for its coolness in Mediterranean climates, while wool provided warmth. Archaeological finds in Egypt and Canaan show blended textiles existed, but were mostly reserved for elite or priestly garments. This reference is found Baruch 2011 from Textiles of the Ancient Near East. Reference, you can look that up. Wool and linen were seen as symbolically opposite, representing animal and plant origins. Wool, of course, for animal, and linen for plant. This command follows a recurring Torah principle of avoiding hybrids, as in mixed crops or crossbred animals. Other fibers, like goat hair or camel hair, were less common and not ritually symbolic. Biblical commentators, including Rashi and, I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce his name right, but Maimonides, again, that's probably not correct, suggests the restriction reinforced Israel's distinct cultural and religious identity, in contrast to neighboring nations who freely blended fabrics for status or fashion. This quote is from Rashi on Leviticus 19:19, 12th century. Maimonides Mishnah Torah from 12th century. Textile production in Israel between 1500 and 586 BCE, and for this article I'm kind of sticking with normal names, normal terms, was labor intensive. Wool required shearing, cleaning, carding, spinning, and weaving. Carding was basically the act of, you had like a handheld, they were kind of like a brush, and you would essentially use this brush to basically help make wool more easy to use, essentially to work with. Specifically speaking, carding is a mechanical process that disentangles, cleans, and intermixes fibers to produce a continuous web or silver sliver suitable for subsequent processing. It can be used, of course, now machines do it today, but you can also do it by hand. So that's what carding is. Wool required shearing, cleaning, carding, spinning, and weaving. Linen involved harvesting, flax, retting, spinning, and bleaching, a process that could take months. This is from the same reference, Baruch 2011, Textiles of the Ancient Near East. And again, just for your benefit, the process of retting is a textile process for separating the based fiber in plants from the non-fibrous materials to create fibers that can be spun into yarn. I just like to give you just a really quick definition of what some of these words are, because some people would have never heard them before. Most households produced their own fabrics, but higher quality textiles were often imported from Egypt or Phoenicia. Combining fibers meant extra steps, specialized looms, and careful alignment of threads, making the process technically challenging for everyday use. Garments blending wool and linen were rare because of the technical difficulty and cost. Linen alone was expensive, often reserved for priests or the elite. Wool added durability, but required different weaving techniques. Studies of ancient Canaanite and Israelite settlements indicate less than 5% of textile remnants show hybrid fabrics, supporting the biblical focus on maintaining clear material boundaries. This is from Baruch 2011, Levy 1992, Textiles and Society in Ancient Israel. Neighboring Egypt and Mesopotamia produced mixed fabrics for ceremonial or elite clothing. Egyptian tombs from 1400 BCE revealed linen-wool blends in royal attire, indicating the knowledge and use of hybrid textiles were widespread outside Israel. The biblical restriction likely emphasized Israel's distinct religious and cultural identity rather than a technological limitation. That reference is from Sha'atnez, 1997, Economy and Society in the Ancient Near East. The prohibition against mixing wool and linen functioned as a clear identity marker for Israel. In Wa'ikra, or Leviticus 19:2, Elohim commands the people to be holy. For I, Yah, your Elohim, am holy. Establishing that ritual and social behaviors reflect divine standards. Unlike neighboring Canaanite and Egyptian societies, which freely combined fibers, Israel's textile laws created visible distinctions that reinforced national and religious boundaries. This is found reference-wise in Milgram 2000 on Leviticus 17 through 22. Archaeological evidence shows that hybrid textiles were common in Egypt and Mesopotamia, making Israel's avoidance a deliberate cultural separation. The Torah consistently separates the categories to reflect cosmic and moral order. Wool represents animal life, linen, plant life. Combining them blurred symbolic distinctions, which, in Israelite thought, could undermine holiness. Scholars like Jacob Milgram argue that these categorical separations extend beyond textiles to food laws, animal breeding, and crop planting, emphasizing a worldview in which order mirrors divine creation. That's found as a reference from Milgram 1991 on Leviticus 1 through 16. The Sha'atnez law dealing with these mixed fabrics, aligns with prohibitions against crossbreeding animals, as found in Weikra Leviticus 19:19, and sowing mixed seeds, as found in Devarim Deuteronomy 22:9. These non-hybrid laws create an integrated system emphasizing Israel's obedience and distinctiveness. Anthropologist Mary Douglas highlights that such rules reinforce social cohesion by translating divine order into daily practices, as found in Douglas 1966, Purity and Danger. The law thus functions both spiritually and socially, shaping behavior to reflect Israel's covenantal identity. Early Christians, including the apostles, largely saw ceremonial purity laws as fulfilled in Messiah, which I highly disagree with, and we've covered that in our expose on Torah and why Yahshua's disciples actually still held to the law in almost its full entirety, save for the sacrificial laws of the substitutionary sacrifices of animals. Acts 15 reflects debates over Mosaic regulations, emphasizing faith over ritual observance. Church fathers such as Augustine, circa 354 to 430 CE or Common Era, interpreted Levitical commands symbolically, suggesting they pointed towards spiritual holiness rather than literal enforcement in daily life. The Sha'atnez prohibition was viewed as culturally bound to Israel rather than a universal Christian mandate, which, of course, once we start getting into the writings of the church fathers and their interpretations, men such as Augustine, Jerome, Tertullian, Origen, pretty much all of those Gentile converted believers to the faith, once we get into that very apostate generation of the early assemblies from the 2nd century on up to the 4th and the 5th, we start getting, of course, into a very blasphemous, heretical time. I have absolutely, none of you are surprised to hear this. I've said it many times, but of course, anytime that any of the church fathers ever said anything about faith, I immediately call heresy on blasphemy on almost everything they ever said, because, in my opinion, these were very wicked, evil men who took their own Greco-Roman pagan backgrounds, their Gentile philosophy, and their respect and regard for philosophy, and in every way, I believe they made an absolute abomination of Father's covenant, of Father's laws, of the true spirit and the true meaning of what Yahshua's sacrifice entailed. They absolutely stripped almost all Hebraic meaning from the faith. And of course, Augustine was one of the church fathers who argued the most vociferously against some of the books, the incredibly important, what are considered extra biblical books today that were taken out of the Bible. He was one of the church fathers that argued the most vehemently for the removal of such books from what later became the canon, recognized by the Western Church, such as the Book of Enoch, an incredibly important literary work of sacred scripture that was viewed as heavily inspired by the early assemblies, by even Yahshua's disciples. It was referenced in the book of Yehuda, of Jude. You find echoes of it in the book of Daniel. All of the early patriarchs had a respect for Enoch, especially several of the sects of Judaism before Yahshua came along had a deep respect for the book of Enoch. And Augustine was one of the church fathers who most vociferously argued for the removal of such books from the canon, deeming them silly and spurious and nonsensical. So, I mean, obviously, for me, once you get into any of the writings of the church fathers, I view them as anybody who's a closet nerd like me will know what I'm about to say. I view all the church fathers, they were the hidden Sith within the early faith assemblies. They were largely responsible for beginning the poisoning of the renewed covenant faith and making a bastardization of it. So obviously I have absolutely no respect for those wicked men whatsoever. But regardless, that was Augustine's interpretation on the Sha'atnez, or the law concerning how one was to wear clothing. It's interesting to note that modern ethical fashion and sustainability advocates sometimes reference Sha'atnez as a model for mindful material use. Avoiding unnecessary blends can promote durability, recycling, and transparency in sourcing. Textile scholars note that this perspective reinterprets an ancient religious law as a practical guide for responsible consumption. That reference is again found in the same reference, Baruch 2011, Textiles of the Ancient Near East. Now, some people do not agree with this. I personally disagree with those who do not agree with this. But if we look, for instance, at one very practical, common sense facet of the Sha'atnez, or the wearing of mixed fabrics, as we talked about in this long series of Torah, one thing that I've argued is that all of Father's laws of Torah also made good practical sense, not just common sense, but also in terms of medical health, in terms of societal, moral, spiritual, physical health. All of Father's laws had a very logical, insightful reason for why that he commanded the things that he did to the people of Israel, and for anyone who claims to be a spiritual inheritor as a member of the New Covenant Assembly of the promises made to the people of Israel. One thing that is important to note, and I've studied and researched this for myself, I believe this to be a truth, there's also an important, what I feel to be a conscientious health sad note to make about the Sha'atnez, about not wearing clothing of mixed fabrics. You can look this up for yourself online. You'll find this as being a pretty general rule of thumb. Wearing clothing made from mixed fabrics can cause allergies because different materials may contain various irritants or allergens, such as dyes, chemicals, or synthetic fibers that can trigger skin reactions. Additionally, the combination of fabrics can lead to increased friction and moisture retention, exacerbating or making worse irritation and allergic responses. Dyes and chemicals, for instance, many fabrics are treated with dyes and chemicals that can cause skin irritation. I know this is modern, but stay with me. Common allergens include formaldehyde resins and azo dyes. Fabrics like polyester, nylon, and spandex are less breathable and can trap heat and moisture against the skin, leading to irritation. The combination of different materials can create friction against the skin, especially in areas where clothing fits tightly. This can exacerbate irritation and lead to conditions like irritant dermatitis. Mixed fabrics may not wick moisture away effectively, leading to sweat buildup. This can create a breeding ground for bacteria and fungi, further aggravating skin and reactions. So there's also, I believe, a very practical health conscientious variable to this. Even in the ancient sense of wearing mixed fabrics of wool and linen, which were the predominant materials in the ancient world, especially in the Near East. Yeah, again, occasionally you had camel hair or goat's hair, but I believe that even concerning ancient materials, ancient clothing that was mixed with wool and linen, there are a lot of people that have sensitive skin. There are people I know, people personally myself, who have broken out and had allergic reactions to clothing that they wear. I've known of people literally who actually developed allergies because of certain material that they wore, that when you read the tag, you found that it was made of blended materials. And I've known people who had allergic reactions, their skin would break out because of the clothing they were wearing, which a lot of times they were made of mixed fibers. So I believe also Father commanded the Sha'atnez and the enforcement of wearing clothes made of one particular fiber, not mixed fibers, because again, some people do have sensitive skin. You can't have breakouts. But more than just even the health end of it, some people will say, well, that's allergic reaction. Not everybody is going to be victim to allergic reaction. You're talking about maybe a relatively small minority, perhaps so. But that is a factor to be taken into consideration. There's also the fact that, again, as we've covered, a big thing about Father commanding the people of Israel to avoid from mixed fabrics was he wanted the people to once more be distinct from the people around them. And I find that is a very, very important thing that a lot of people, they don't think of and they totally overlook, is every single law in Torah, when you look at how Father commanded the people of Israel to live, with concerns to the grander framework of Torah, all throughout the Pentateuch, how Father commanded the people of Israel to live had a lot to do with separating them from the peoples of the nations around them. That was a very big deal. The laws, how they ate, how they dressed, how they tended their fields, of course, their religious laws, which was a big thing, and of course, their religious laws interwove within the framework of societal law, moral law, I mean, even civil law. Their religious framework, which was Torah, being that in many ways Israel was basically a theocracy, meaning they were run by their religious code of conduct, the Torah. One of the most important facets of Torah, when you break down everything, every law, every section of the law, one thing that you see that appears consistently is Father commanding the people of Israel to differentiate themselves from the people around them, the pagan peoples around them. Father, this is, you never hear this in Christianity today. You'll hear it in very few Jewish circles even, because our current world today is all about inclusion. It's all about tearing down walls and building bridges, and everybody's exactly the same. You don't hear this in Christianity, very, very little. You hear it very little in especially Reform Judaism. One thing that is big that Scripture consistently hammers home, the First Covenant Old Testament Scriptures, Father was big on boundaries and divisions, groups and camps. Father had an established order. He has an established order of how all things are meant to be ordered and governed within their respective categories of how he made them to be. The people of Israel, a very important facet of Torah was it was meant to make them a very distinct people, set aside from everyone around them. They were not meant to integrate. They were not meant to intermix, intermingle. The people of Israel were meant to be a nation who remained within their own borders of their own land with no intermingling, no cross-breeding or intermarrying with any of the people around them. They were meant to be iso-nationalists. They were meant to remain a tight-knit community bound by their shared religious law in the Almighty, the Elohim, who they worshipped. Everything about Israelite culture was taken from and formulated from the commands of the Torah. And one thing that Father was consistent upon throughout the entirety of Torah is that sense of exclusivity and how the people of Israel were to live and adopt their culture contrary to the people that were around them. And that's a big deal. And that's one of the biggest things the Sha'atnez with mixed fabrics was meant to convey, was they were meant to dress differently, even in how they made their clothing and wore their clothing. Even how they dressed was to separate them from how the people around them, the pagan nations around them, even dressed. So Father was big on making a distinction. So for the Sha'atnez wearing clothing of mixed fabrics, it's not just the health potential side of it, avoiding potential skin allergens or irritations through wearing clothing that might be comprised of multiple fabrics, multiple fibers, or be it the spiritual moralistic principle of the Sha'atnez, or the people of Israel, of being a distinct, set-aside people. The Sha'atnez had a reason. It had the law of not wearing clothing of mixed fabrics had a very particular pointed meaning that touched every facet of the life of the people of Israel. Again, spiritual, cultural, and even, again, I say this, I feel it to be just a common sense fact, even health concerning potential allergens on the skin. Just because back then they didn't have the ability to make synthetic materials such as nylon or spandex, it didn't mean that the blending of two types of fibers like wool and linen could not potentially result in an allergic reaction, a breakout on somebody who were to wear such a mixing of fabric. So that's very, very important concerning what the Sha'atnez is. How does the Sha'atnez affect us today? I mean, obviously, you can still follow those same laws by looking at and studying what you wear. Almost every piece of clothing that we ever buy is going to have, your tag on the inside. It's going to tell you what the material that you wear is made of. And if you want to be mindful of observing the Sha'atnez and not wearing clothing that is mixed of multiple different fabrics, mixed fabrics, then be more mindful of what clothing that you wear, and try to make sure that the clothing you wear is all of the same material instead of mixing. So you can be mindful of that. We can look into that. We can study and research what we wear, and by so doing, we can live and adhere to the Sha'atnez, regulating for our own good and our own benefit what clothing we wear, most especially so we can avoid potential allergens or skin irritants that could erupt and break out in any one of us at any time. Beyond that, however, I want to make now a very important point known on this, in the spirit. I believe that we're close to the end of Torah, our Torah series. We may still have a video or two to do. I'll know as Father has me go further through the last bits of Wa'ikra Leviticus. I'll know then, but since we are getting toward the end, there's something that I want to make very clearly known, and it's highly important, and it is this. As I said a minute ago, one of the things that is incredibly important about what we find in Torah is Father consistently making apparently known all throughout the Pentateuch one single important thing that the laws were meant to do, and that was, again, giving the people of Israel a separate, distinct, special identity. And that's a theme we find consistently, not just with the people of Israel. We find it all throughout the scriptural narrative, all throughout the First Covenant Old Testament scriptures, most especially. Everything and everyone fit into their own group, their own quote-unquote camp. Father made life. He made all things in this world in its division. Everything to its group, everything according to its kind. Whether it's the natural order, be it plant life, be it animals within the animal kingdom, marine life, birds, anything of the ornithological variety, and even human beings. Father made everything according to how it was meant to fit within its own unique environmental homeostasis, meaning basically how that those particular things were meant to function in a healthy way within their own environment or within their own structure. Father made nothing chaotic. He didn't make anything that he threw it at the wall, stuck it at the wall, closed his eyes and said, all right, let's see if this sticks. Let's see if this works. Father did nothing without purpose, reason, and meaning. He's not an Elohim, an almighty of waste. Everything he does has got a purpose, a pointed purpose. Everything is meant to fit into its place. And if you look around at the world today, I probably don't need to tell you this because I'm sure that whoever you are insightful enough to see this for yourself, especially if you stop and just look around for a moment. What is one thing that the world has done an exceedingly effective job at accomplishing over the last few hundred years, especially in the last 100 years alone? Mankind endeavors, especially today, to tear down walls, to, as they say, tear down walls and dividers and build bridges. A mantra today that you find, it's preached everywhere. It's in entertainment and movies and music and social media. It's everywhere in our culture. From the time that you're little all the way up through, it's something that we are ingrained to believe in. It's drilled into our mind, is that everybody and everything has to basically be one. We are all one. We're all the exact same. Culturally speaking, even some people would like to make everybody the same. Politically speaking, we are in an era where inclusiveness is at an all-time high. Everybody today trumpets under the auspices of righteousness and goodness and love and compassion, that everybody is exactly the same. Everybody needs to just step out of their camps and step out of their individual groups, and everybody is exactly the same. Cultural respect, cultural integrity, boundaries that make people what they are, that make individual races and ethnicities or individual nationalities, distinct and special and separate. There is a concerted effort, and it's been a concerted effort for decades, to tear down those unique divides that make people of all different groups what they are. And it doesn't stop at humanity. It's also, you see it in the natural world. There has long been this campaign to restructure the world around us, even the natural order, and make everything uniform in the same way. I mean, everywhere, no matter where you go in the world today, you see things like cross-germination, people hybridizing plants and flowers. You find it even a lot of times with how people are attempting to affect agriculture, modifying seeds grown in fields for food. You see it a lot with animals. The hybridization of animals is a big deal, even if it's just within particular species, within the same general species. People have long attempted to breed dogs, to crossbreed different species of dogs, to make these new, unique, distinguished breeds. You see it with cats. You see it in the world at large, even with livestock, with wild animals. For instance, the tiger and the lion, crossbreeding the tiger and the lion, crossbreeding the horse and the donkey. This world is an advocate for taking diversity, for taking exclusivity, things that fit into particular groups and camps, racial, within species, within genuses, the natural world, the animal kingdom, humankind. And today, the modus operandi of man is to take all these divisions, these natural built-in divisions, and strip them away. Now, the ironic thing about this is when you go through the scriptural narrative, Father is completely on the opposite side of that. Father did not teach man or lay out in his law. He did not form and structure this world to exist in such a way of no barriers, no divisions, no groups. Everything and everyone is the exact same. That's not how the world was made. All throughout the scriptural narrative, again, just in we're equal Leviticus and Devarim, Deuteronomy, we read the scripture earlier about how the people of Israel were commanded, don't just not wear clothing made of mixed fabrics, the Sha'atnez, but don't plant your field with two types of seed. Don't ever crossbreed your livestock. Right there, Father very clearly prohibited. He shows just one little taste in his natural order for there being division, distinction, and separation. You find that same theme echoed all throughout the rest of the scripture. When the people of Israel went into the land of Israel, of Canaan, to take the land, Father told them to commit total genocide of the people of Canaan, not to intermix or intermarry with them, or to synchronize their religious practices with the people of Canaan, but to wipe them out, to wipe out their total memory. He forbade them from intermarrying with people around them. In fact, concerning, for instance, the people of Edom and Moab, he said that no one of the people of Moab or Edom was to join the congregation of the people, basically the nation of Israel, even up to the 10th generation, because of the particular affront the people of Edom and Moab delivered to the people of Israel, or inflicted upon them, as recorded mainly in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers. And even an Egyptian was not able to come into the nation of Israel among the people until the 3rd generation. The people were blatantly told again and again and again they were to separate their practices, their religious practices, their cultural practices, from the people around them. They were not to intermingle. They were not to crossbreed. Father commanded they were not to give their sons and daughters to other people outside of their national, ethnic camp, to someone of another group. And the interesting thing about that was, it wasn't like the people around them who bordered them, such as the Syrians or the Moabites or the Edomites or the Amorites or the Ammonites. It wasn't like these people were completely culturally separate from them in every way. I mean, the Edomites and the Ammonites, they were related in a very distant but still interconnected manner, going all the way back to Avraham, the people of Moab and Ammon being related to or descended from Lot, who was Avraham or Abraham's nephew. The people of Midian, which was another ancient Near East people, they were the descendants of one of Avraham's children by Keturah, his second wife. So a lot of those Near East peoples, they were actually related to the people of Israel, or the Ishmaelites, ancestors of modern-day Arabians. The Ishmaelites, they were most especially related to the people of Israel because their father was Ishmael, the brother of Isaac or Isaac, the sons of Avraham himself, Abraham. But fathers still commanded the people of Israel. They were not to interbreed. They were not to intermarry. They were not to give their sons and daughters to the people of the nations around them. And when we look at the narrative, for instance, of the book of Azariah or Ezra, which takes place around the Second Temple period, between about the 4th and 5th centuries BCE, when the people of Israel came back from captivity in Babylon after 70 years, they were allowed to go back to the land of Israel. One of the immediate sins they committed, well, you also find this in echoes and mentions of it in the book of Nehemiah, but mainly in the book of Ezra. You find the people of Israel, one thing they were guilty of was the men of Israel started to take wives of the foreigners around them who lived around them. And Azariah, Ezra, he came in and he said, no, you are not allowed to do this. On account of Gentile pagan women did our ancestors sin largely, and we were cast out of our land in the first place. They had to literally put their wives away, meaning they had to get rid of their foreign wives. And some of them had already had children with them. They had to get rid of their foreign wives and children because it was an affront. It was a sin. Father did not allow that. Shlomo, Solomon, he literally led the kingdom of Israel in their golden age to ruin because he intermarried with pagan Gentile women outside of the boundaries of Israel. Father very clearly commanded his people that they were to keep to themselves. They were to keep to their own group, keep to their own camp. And the Torah made this abundantly clear. You find Father's natural order, how he governs and how he made his natural world, his order, how he made it to exist. We find very clear blueprints of this, evidence of this in Torah, telling the people of Israel, don't mix your seed for your field. Don't mix your livestock. No hybridization. Don't even wear fabric, mixed fabric. Father was not this egalitarian, meaning all equality, this inclusive, all compassionate, tear down the walls and barriers and bring everybody in with no separation kind of deity. That was not who Father was or is. When Father created all things, he had an order of which all things were meant to exist. The divine heavenlies, as well as the lower material earthly. There is, especially the extra-biblical writings, you read the writings of Enoch, the writings of Yasher, especially Enoch. You find it very, very clearly explained that the divine realms, the different realms of the heavenly dimensions, has a hierarchy and an order. How much more so the material realms? In the natural world, whether it's trees, whether it's flowers, plants, whether it's agriculture, seeds for produce, whether it be animals, birds, fish, beasts, animals, dogs, cats, humans, Father made a distinction for everything he made. Everything belongs in its mold. Everything. Now, I don't think that it takes a genius. I don't think it takes a man with a degree in philosophy to see the trend of what modern man has done. We live unequivocally in a time right now, worldwide, where people are more secular and people live all the governments of the world, not just one, but the worldwide government as a body lives farther removed from the biblical commandments and tenets of the laws of Yah, Elohim, from the bounds of Torah as man ever has. There is less regard for faith. There's less regard for the law of the Almighty. There's less mention of Him. There is less mention of biblical law, biblical commands than there's ever been. We live in a heavily secular society. It doesn't matter where you're from. This is not just an issue in the United States. You find it in most of the civilized Western countries you'll go to. You especially find it in the Orient. You'll especially find it in the Middle East. This world has removed itself from the Torah of Yah, from His natural order. You see it in everything about what is taught today. And our modern society, it's echoed in social media. Again, it's taught in schools. It's taught to us from the time that we're young. We're very, very small. We are taught inclusiveness, unity, equality. There is no such thing. Camps and groups and divisions is bad. Exclusiveness is bad. Individual groups and stations and classes is bad. It makes people feel bad about themselves. It makes people feel inferior. We're taught today there is an attempt to make everything the exact same. Do away with boundaries. Do away with borders. Do away with individual camps and groups and categories. This is an abomination. On a strictly biblical, faith-oriented, divine mandate, perspective, this is flawed. This is wrong. The way this world teaches people to live today, what this world teaches as being how we are supposed to think, is wrong. There is meant to be division. There is meant to be groups. There's meant to be classes. There's meant to be stations. There's meant to be categories. Hybridization, cross-mingling, intermingling, intermarrying, interbreeding is wrong. It violates Father's natural order. If you go and you read the book of Enoch, it makes very clear one of the chiefest, most abominable sins of the Watchers, the divine beings that came down and not only took wives of human women, but also ruled over men ruthlessly and started to introduce them to them the ways of hidden workings, basically the groundwork of many sinful activities. The Watchers, one of the sins that was in text, was spoken against them, was their attempt to hybridize and to crossbreed, to intermingle, to erase the natural boundaries of everything Father made. The Watchers took creatures Father made, animals, and they crossbred them. They even try to crossbreed animals with man. And of course, the act of the Watchers themselves, crossbreeding with women, bore abominations, giants, or Nephilim. That was one of the biggest grievances, crimes, that was leveled against the Watchers, that they were imprisoned over. Hybridization, intermingling. You know, it's a funny historical fact that when you look over the ancient record versus the modern time, you know, today you look around and things like hybridization, cross-species hybridization within plants, animals, with people, intermarrying, interbreeding, it's commonplace. It's common now in the world we live in. Most people don't bat an eye over it. It's just everywhere you look. Animals being crossbred, you know, the liger, the crossbreed between a tiger and a lion, all the different animals that they are constantly trying to crossbreed. The mule, the crossbreed of a horse and a donkey. Today, it's just common. People literally don't think anything of it. There's no respect anymore for natural boundaries. People look at a fruit tree. They look at a flower. They look at the seeds for agriculture. It's for something to be grown, for produce. They look at animals. They look at humans. And people now think they don't respect the natural boundaries of how the Creator made everything. They don't look at it and say, He made it this way, it's good the way it is, leave it alone. People instead now look at everything and they say, well, we can mix and match it all now. We can combine everything together. Let's see what we can make if we can mesh these things together. In ancient times, you didn't see that. Yes, with some very wicked, evil empires, ancient imperial powers, with some very wicked pagan peoples. I mean, Rome, admittedly, they were very good at synchronizing, not just religious practices, but cultural practices. Yes, the Greek and Roman empires, they were hedonistic. They were moralistically evil beyond imagining. They practiced things like homosexuality, reverse polygamy, reverse harems, basically a woman with multiple husbands. Yes, the Greeks and Romans were especially evil, and they practiced many different abominations. But I mean, if we're comparing moralistically where we are today with the Greeks and Romans of old, if that's the measure we're using for how good or bad we are, then that shows you how far we've fallen, because they were notoriously a very degraded, wicked society. From their top governing officials down. But even in ancient times, or even just in antiquity, and just a few hundred years ago, there were still lines within the natural order that people respected for the most part. You didn't really hear about crossbreeding, cross genetics like you hear today with the advancements in modern medicine and modern science. And you didn't really hear as much about people trying to crossbreed flowers and trees and plants and animals. People have more of a respect for the natural order. And here's another thing. I know this is going to sound very contentious, but it is what it is. There's going to be a lot of people I know that think I'm racist when I say this. That's fine. You can think I'm racist if you want to. I know I'm not. I have, again, friends, people that I know, that I care about very much, who are of other races. But even look at, for instance, interracial relationships today. It doesn't matter what race, I mean, whether it's Oriental, Asian, and Hispanic, or white and black, or whatever. Interracial relationships today, you look around and it's everywhere. People don't think about it. But it's funny. I've read this. Statistically speaking, it's interesting that just in the last 10 years alone, if even that, I mean, I've read that it's really been a boom just in the last, under 10 years. But interracial relationships have really become more commonplace, really due to what is being parroted in our social media, in entertainment. The whole thing of race, the division of race, racism, it's in the forefront again. It's been in the forefront now for quite a few years, especially in the United States. So, the entertainment industry and social media, it brings this stuff to the forefront. Racism, racism, racism. It's everywhere. When something is made a big deal, people are naturally inclined. It is what it is. People are inherently rebellious. When you're a kid, you're told not to do something. What's the one thing you want to do? Especially when you become a teenager. You want to rebel and do what you're told not to do. It's human nature. But as racism has become this overarching problem and issue, now, statistically, I've looked this up, I've researched this, it's a fact, look it up for yourself, interracial relationships are becoming more and more common, but it's not because it's organic, it's not because it's just happening, but because now it's a statement. Now, a lot of people who are interracially involved with someone else, it's a statement. It's a statement you make to say, look, I'm a white guy or a white woman with a black man or a black woman or a Hispanic woman or Asian man or whoever, with whoever it is, and I'm not ashamed. I'm not afraid. Statistically speaking, it's interesting. It's an average I read about, and it was an interracial statistical polling that was done with different interracial couples. And what was funny was with a lot of interracial couplings, one of the things that was most commonly said was these people who were involved in interracial relationships really kind of wore it as that badge of honor of this is how lacking of prejudice I am. This is how accepting I am, and that my romantic partner is of another race. That's not genuine. That's not realistic. That's not something that happened organically, naturally. That is a byproduct of the influence of society, of our modern society, of influencers, social media, of our entertainment, what is being put into television, movies and shows and music, celebrities. It's a monkey see, monkey do effect. And in some ways, I would even kind of call it maybe even kind of like a reverse, I'm going to kind of coin this, a reverse placebo effect. Maybe, like the placebo effect, you take something that actually doesn't do anything at all, and you give it to somebody, and you hype their mind up to think, hey, this really works, but it's a sugar pill. Actually, no, I guess it actually could be called a placebo effect. You look at people and you tell them, okay, this is an issue, like racism. This is a huge issue. This particular group or minority is being held down and oppressed, and you get everybody up in arms over it. Everybody now becomes just an angry mob. You stir them up. And now you take something that was really never an issue, something people never really thought about before, and now you put it out there, and all of a sudden, everybody's hyper aware. Take it back, 10, 20, 30 years ago, before racism got really overcharged again, people would go out. They would go out to a bar. They'd go out, looking for social interaction, looking for a partner. And it wasn't being presented to people at the time. Racism is serious. There's such a racial, ongoing, modern racial segregation being performed. Certain groups are being held down, and white people, you're inherently racist. Now it's like when people go out, now they're thinking about it. Now they're thinking about racism. Now when they see somebody, whereas before, maybe a man or a woman 20 years ago would have went out looking for a partner, and they didn't really pay attention to the skin color of whoever they met. But now, if they meet somebody who happens to be of another race, it's almost like there's this desire to try to make something work with them, to become involved with them, because it's almost like it's a social statement. You want to prove you're not racist. You want to prove you're at the forefront of the initiative to be accepting and diverse. Now people are paying attention to it. Now people are seeing it. When something is brought to the attention of the public, people become hyper-focused on it. Before, it may not have been a problem, but bring it to people's attention, and now it's right there. It's no different than, okay, a couple years ago, I was hearing women, no woman ever said this to me, but I know of a couple people this happened to. But all of a sudden, women, especially women who were on social media, and most people do have social media today, but there was a lot of women from people that I knew that they would talk to. My mother met some, my father met some, where women were becoming hyper offended over the use of the word moist. Which, to some of the people I know that this happened to, when they would just use the word in casual conversation, the woman they would speak to would say, oh, no, don't say that word. Oh, it's a nasty word. And these people that I know who have these interactions, they would be like, what's wrong with the word moist? Oh, don't say that. It's a dirty term. It's a private term. They are taking it in a sexual meaning. They're thinking about it along sexual lines where a woman is concerned in a state of arousal. That's not what the people talking to them meant when they said, like a moist cake. But women were getting all crazy in the head over this word. And like almost anything else, how does it all start? It starts because of influencers, either politicians, celebrities, or social media influencers. Somebody comes along and says, this is bad. This is bad. People hear that, and everybody loves a trend. Everybody loves a new fad. This person says it, they got a couple thousand followers, or a celebrity, or a politician. They have clout. And now everybody that follows them says, oh man, wow, they're right. That's so bad. And they get on the bandwagon, and they don't really even know why they're on the bandwagon. But all of a sudden, it's bad. All of a sudden, it's out there in the open. The same can be said for things like interracial relationships. I remember when I was younger, it wasn't as big of a deal. And it wasn't being thrown out there like it is today. Kind of like homosexuality or transgenderism, especially homosexuality. You didn't really see it. It wasn't as trumpeted as much. In my parents' generation, it wasn't really trumpeted as much. But now, it's all so out in the open, and it's being talked about so much. Equality and diversity, but inclusive diversity. It's all being thrown out there in the open, and there's such a concerted effort tearing down all the walls, and everybody's exactly the same. Now all this stuff is it's the rage. It's right out there in the open, and now everybody wants a piece of it because they want to be the first ones to show they don't have a problem with it. Look, I'll be the first one to say, I've got, as I've said before, I have friends from other races, people that I like and I genuinely care about. I have black friends, I have Oriental Asian friends, I have Hispanic, Latino friends, people I care about very, very much. I would never, there's no desire in me to ever attempt to become romantically involved with somebody of another race. And why do I feel that way? It's not because I hate people of other races. It's not because I hate black people or Oriental people or Hispanic, Latino, or Middle Eastern people. It has nothing to do with that. It's because I believe in how my Father made this world. I believe in the natural order. I believe in the common sense structure of everything we see. Mankind can corrupt and they can try to throw a whole bunch of scientific words at something and take the color of the sky and try to throw a whole bunch of scientific words at it and make people believe the sky's not blue anymore. Or gender science. Scientists can throw a whole bunch of words at people who believe in transgenderism, and these transgender scientists can say, well, actually there's more than one gender, blah, 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 blah. They can throw a whole bunch of scientific words at it and try to gaslight people, essentially, and fool them. But common sense will out. Common sense cannot be undone. It can't be fooled. Common sense is common sense. I've said this again and again and again. And I want you to really think about this, not as somebody who was indoctrinated or was told to think this way by your parents or your friends or your church or the school system or the university you went to, or because of something you heard a social media influencer say, you read it online, or because a politician said it or a celebrity said it or you saw it in a movie or a show. Think about this for yourself with your own mind. Just open your eyes for a second. Think about this. If there's no such thing as division and borders and separation and distinction, why, as an example, is there a male and a female of every single animal in the animal kingdom? Generally speaking, like 99% of the time. And I'm not talking about, some species of like amphibians, frogs. I'm talking about, generally speaking, within almost all animals in the animal kingdom, birds, marine life, animals. Why is it there is a male and female of it? Even animals that are related within subspecies, such as in the feline, the big cat genome, tigers, lions, cheetahs. Why is there a male and a female of every animal within those groups of subspecies? Why is there a male and a female of every bird, of fish? Why is there a male and a female? Why wasn't there just all male tigers and all female lions. Look at humans. This is what applies most to you and me. Why did the Almighty Elohim make a white man, a Caucasian man, and a Caucasian woman? Why is there a black man and a black woman? Why is there a black, Latino, Hispanic group, male and female? Oriental. Why is that? Breaking down, go back into evolution, not Darwinian crap, but sure, go back and break it down into, primitive peoples. You can explain the evolution of how, Asians eventually came on the scene, how black people emerged and Caucasians, and you can explain, primitively speaking, how they actually came to be as a people, but the question remains, why did the Almighty create a male and a female of every subspecies, even of human? And let me ask you this. If interracial relationships was okay, why did he make a male and a female of every group of man? He does nothing without a purpose and a reason. Why did he not just make all white men and black women, or Oriental women and Hispanic men? Why did he make a male and a female for every species of man according to his kind? Culturally speaking, they're all different. Black people are culturally very different from white people. White people are culturally very different from Oriental, Asian people. They are very different culturally speaking from Hispanic, Latino people. Even biologically, you can even break down medically, even the biology. We talked about this a little bit before in that video we did on slavery. Even the biology of people from different races is different to a point. Father has made everything for a reason. Whether you hate this or you love it, or it doesn't matter. Yah Elohim, the Father, he's not a being of inclusiveness, and equality, and everybody is the exact same. There's no borders, no boundaries. That's not him. That's not how he created. It's not how he governs. It's not how he made his natural order to work within stations, within classes, within species, within groups, each according to its kind. Each according to its kind. He didn't make animals to crossbreed. They're sterile. Crossbred animals are sterile. He didn't make flowers and trees and plant life to crossbreed. He didn't make humans to crossbreed. The way things are today, it's funny. Every time humans, pick out a new cause they want to fight for, that is of the worm. It's the worm trying to further sow discord in Father's natural order. But every time, it's ironic, people try to make up some new cause to fight for. It's funny how through their effort in doing it, they actually end up completely demolishing their own cause. I mean, it's like feminism. When women really wanted empowerment, they wanted to be equal, but it's funny, the act of feminism has now it's turned many, many men more against women. It's actually put more weight on women. Feminism in many ways has made women more so the subject of hostility. Racism. By trying to hyper-focus on races and hyper-focus on individual groups and oppression, now everybody's hyper-aware of racism, and now people are looking at other races with more suspicion, more wariness, more contention than just a couple years ago. It's at the point now Where, if I go out and I see an interracial couple walking around, I cannot take them seriously. Because I think to myself, are you together because you actually want to be together, or are you together because you're making some kind of a statement? Is it because you're trying to prove you're not prejudiced? And I'm not the only one who thinks that way. I've actually spoken to quite a few people who feel the same way as I do now. And it's not just interracial relationships. It can also be interracial friendships, but not so much. Especially interracial relationships now, because it's being made such a big deal of. Now, people, ironically, people of interracial relationships are being put under more of a magnifying glass, more of a microscope. They're now getting weirder looks. They're now being treated with less legitimacy than before, because it's so in the forefront now. It's so out there that now people look at it and they think, that can't be legitimate. You're making a statement. You're with that person because you're making a statement. Wow. That's what I think. Because it's everywhere. That's the way a lot of people that I've met from different walks of life feel. Just like the law of mixed fabrics, the Torah, very clearly prescribing divisions, separations, and groupings. Don't sow your field with more than one kind of seed. No cross hybridization. Now, just like how Father commands there to be separation and all those things, now we look around at the world today, and man has made a concerted effort of removing every barrier, every wall, every group, every individual station, and making everybody basically a copy-pasted cardboard cutout. And that's so wrong. It's not how things are meant to be. Father created his natural world to be, in many ways, exclusive. It doesn't mean that we hate one another. It doesn't mean we can't be friends with people of other groups. But there's meant to be exclusions. There's meant to be groups. There's meant to be cultural divides. There's meant to be some walls and barriers. Not out of hatred, but because it's what protects our natural culture or how we were made as a particular subspecies. It's natural. And to try to influence, to try to alter the natural order of how Father made things, we have turned this world into an abomination. And now everything is just completely upside down. And it's wrong. It's wrong. This world is not fairer. This world is not more inclusive and equal, and this world is not a utopia or any closer to being a utopia because of the barriers we've torn down. We now live in a time of anarchy and unbridled chaos because, like livestock who had their fences ripped away and everyone herded into the same group, we're all so mixed matched and interwoven now with one another. We don't know who is or who what is. Everything's literally up is now down, down is up, and everybody's confused. Order must be restored in every way. Politically, governmentally, nationally, ethnically, racially, now concerning, the natural world, plants, animals, order has to be restored. Divides have to be erected again for the betterment and the welfare of people's mental sanity and ultimately the longevity, the biological well-being and health of not just mankind, animal kind, the natural world. Everything is so unhealthy and so toxic and so corrupted now. It's just like the time of the pre-flood world. Everything has been cross-hybridized. Everything has been mutated. Intermarriage, interbreeding. Man is corrupted now. Man, and I'm not just don't mean on this level of sin. Mankind is literally anemic. Mankind has become weakened by its corruption. And it has to be purified. It has got to be restored to its natural, proper, original state. And Father will bring that to pass. Father will bring order back to this world. He will restore his natural order. And it'll be very hard for many, many, many people to accept, but he will do so. Because this lawlessness and this anarchy cannot endure long before, as we are seeing, it starts to implode and crumble in on itself. So, to take away from this video today, what you need to remember most importantly is, yes, the Sha'atnez, weaving of fabrics. Yes, you can most definitely still go back and observe that today if you want. Our clothing has tags. But remember, Father has an order, a natural order. He has a distinction in everything. We have to remember that. We cannot tear down those borders. Father made them for a reason. And when we tear them down, we invite anarchy and we invite chaos. And that is not his way.